محمد وآل محمد صلوات. محمد وآل محمد صلوات. میرے عباس کے پرچم کو اٹھائے رکھنا، میرے عباس کے پرچم کو اٹھائے رکھنا، غم شبیر کی کندی، غم شبیر کی کندی جلائے رکھنا، میرے عباس کے پرچم کو اٹھائے رکھنا، بنت زہرا کو نہروں نے دیا لوگوں نے، بنت زہرا کو نہروں نے دیا لوگوں نے، غم کے دریاؤں کو آنکھوں، غم کے دریاؤں کو آنکھوں سے بہائے رکھنا، میرے عباس کے پرچم کو اٹھائے رکھنا. محمد وآل محمد صلوات. ایک اور درود پڑھیں محمد وآل محمد پر. حسین بن کے زمانے پہ چھا گئی زینب، حسین بن کے زمانے پہ چھا گئی زبان تیغ سے کوفہ ہلا گئی زینب، قدم قدم پہ جلائے حسینیت کے چراغ، قدم قدم پہ جلائے حسینیت کے چراغ، دیے یزید کے سارے بجھا گئی زینب، دیے یزید کے سارے بجھا گئی زینب، علی کی یاد کو زندہ کیا زمانے میں، علی کی یاد کو زندہ کیا زمانے میں، جگہ جگہ پہ جو خطبے سنا گئی زینب جگہ جگہ پہ جو خطبے سنا گئی زینب قسم خدا کی یہ احسان بنت زہرا ہے قسم خدا کی قسم خدا کی یہ احسان بنت زہرا ہے ہمیں حسین کا ماتم سکھا گئی زینب ہمیں حسین کا ماتم سکھا گئی زینب اسیر ہو گئی در پھری زمانے میں اسیر ہو گئی در پھری زمانے میں حسینیت کو مگر جگ مگا گئی زینب ضعیف بھائی کا غم بانٹنے کو مقتل میں ضعیف بھائی کا ضعیف بھائی کا غم بانٹنے کو مقتل میں جوان بھتیجے کے لاشیں پہ آ گئی زینب حسین بن کے زمانے پہ چھا گئی زینب زبان تیغ سے کوفہ ہلا گئی زینب اور محمد و آل محمد صلوات
برآل نبی اولاد علی بآواز بلند صلوات شبیر تو نے ایسے بھی درد و الم سہے شبیر تو نے ایسے بھی درد و الم سہے جن کا دہر میں سامنا کوئی نہ کر سکے، شبیر تو نے ایسے بھی درد و الم سہے، مقتول تجھ سا دنیا میں گزرا نہیں کوئی، مقتول تجھ سا دنیا میں گزرا نہیں کوئی، خود قتل کر کے جس کو ہے قاتل بھی رو پڑے، خود قتل کر کے جس کو ہے قاتل بھی رو پڑے، جن کا دہر میں سامنا کوئی نہ کر سکے، شبیر تو نے ایسے بھی درد و الم سہے، زینب پہ بے کسی کی قیامت گزر گئی، زینب پہ بے کسی کی قیامت گزر گئی، عباس تیرے قاتل خیموں میں جب گھسے، عباس تیرے قاتل خیموں میں جب گھسے، کتنی غریب ہو گئی علی کی بہو رباب، کتنی غریب ہو گئی علی کی بہو رباب، سب ختم جس کے رشتے ہیں ایک پل میں ہو گئے، شبیر تو نے ایسے بھی درد و الم سہے، زیارت میں میرے بارویں ہادی کا ہے سلام، زیارت میں میرے بارویں ہادی کا ہے سلام، ان بیویوں پہ جن کے تھے بالوں میں منہ چھپے، ان بیویوں پہ جن کے تھے بالوں میں منہ چھپے، جن کا دہر میں سامنا کوئی نہ کر سکے، شبیر تو نے ایسے بھی درد و الم سہے، ان کی امیر دنیا میں کوئی نہیں مثال، ان کی امیر دنیا میں کوئی نہیں مثال، راہ خدا میں جن کے ہے نیزوں پہ سر چڑھے، راہ خدا میں جن کے نیزوں پہ سر چڑھے، جن کا دہر میں سامنا کوئی نہ کر سکے، شبیر تو نے ایسے بھی درد و الم سہے. صلوات پر محمد.
Mu'minin, before the English Majlis commences, it's a humble request that brothers, can you move as close as possible, because Maulana Ali Abbas Rizvi has kindly asked you to keep on moving. We don't want any interruptions during the Majlis. It will be highly appreciated if you would be able to move now. By Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad salawat.
مگر اسلام رہے گا، سبیل بہر حال تیرا نام رہے گا. نثار ہونا تھا آخر نثار ہو کے رہے، حسین مرضی پروردگار ہو کے رہے. زباں پہ شکر قمر پر ہے لاس اکبر، حسینہ صبر کے تم تادار ہو کے رہے. صلوات.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، سيدنا ومولانا بالقاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين. أما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والفجر وليال عشر، صدق الله العلي العظيم. Yesterday we concluded on the beginning of what we saw as the government of the 12th Imam alayhi salam. In essence, we summarized really a huge part of future predictions which have been put forward by the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam in regards to the coming of the Mahdi. And so, yesterday we discussed the necessity for us to improve ourselves in every facet of our society, our personal life, our social life, in an attempt to prepare ourselves, to ready ourselves for the coming of that Mahdi. As we mentioned before, the Bani Israel for over 570 years had come into the Hijaz. The purpose of coming into the Hijaz, because they knew an Ahmad was coming. So they came and they established in a desert which was inhabited. There was no one there. There was no purpose for anyone to come there, especially when those Jews had lived prior in North Africa, in Eastern Europe, in Damascus, in Iraq, in what was Babylon. And so you find they lived in high-tech areas where great civilizations grew up. They shifted, they came to this desert, this third world nation, and they re-established everything on the pretext that an Ahmad was coming. So they built an economic system there. and they started to trade there, and people started to come through the Hijaz, and they would trade with them, and they would live there, and they built a defense policy, and they built a social network, and they built an economic policy, and they built a political policy for one purpose. Why? So that the Mahdi would come, or in their eyes the Ahmad would come, and then they would give all of these established entities to the Ahmad to say, right, we have done something for you. Accelerate now to the 21st century. Ask yourselves the question, have I done something for the coming of the Mahdi? What have we done as a nation? Have we established an economic policy? Have we got a social policy? Have we got personal development which is going on? Or is it the fact that we're just bickering amongst ourselves? If they had prepared everything, when the Ahmad came, if they went away from him, if they weren't the chosen people anymore. You see, chosen in a sense that Allah had deemed them chosen because they were following in His commands. The minute they left His commands and went away from chosen, they came down to zero again. In this way today, if you are the chosen people, and as long as you follow the will of Allah, as long as you go on the way of balance, as long as you are not rigid in your ways, as long as you are open-minded, you are the chosen people. The day you close your minds, you push people away from you, you become fundamentalist in your belief, what happens? Allah's shadow goes away from you. And when it goes away from you, then no, you too will be wandering the deserts like Bani Israel did for 40 years or so. Wandering in the deserts, lost. It's the will of Allah that you're saved in the way that you are. The 12th Imam alayhi salam says, very famous narration, he says this. He says, look, your enemies would have overcome you. When you look at the state of Islam today, you see that it's a miracle that Islam is living. From all sides you're attacked, from every angle, from the media all the way down to grassroots level. People don't understand Islam whatsoever in what it is. But today the population of Muslims is increasing. Naturally you would have thought that it was decreasing. When we talk about the enemy destroying you, we talk about people going away from Islam. But today you see people coming towards Islam. As we said, the biggest enemy is ignorance. Within this ignorance you're finding people are coming towards Islam. This is the benefit of the 12th Imam. He says that when your enemies are surrounding you, it is me who takes you out of those problems. Today when the enemy is surrounding you, today when you are falling into terminal decline, what you find is that the Mahdi comes and he lifts you up again. Today you're holding your head up high. Why are you holding your head up high? It's because of that Mahdi. Go back to 2006. There was a war. There was an invasion which took place. It's in front of you. A friend of mine, he goes to that country, particular country in the Middle East in 2006. As he's in the taxi, he meets an individual. He looks at his face and he sees that there's nur shining in his face. He says, tell me, who are you? He says that, look, we were those people who were defending our country. When the invaders came, we were defending. There was only a couple of us. One night, we were on top of a small hill, and the enemy had surrounded us. 2006. How many years ago is that? 5 years. It says the enemy had surrounded us. There were 5 or 6 of us. There were 2,000 of them. We were on top of this hill. It was the time when we were thinking, what are we going to do? At that moment, I went and I prayed. And when I went and I prayed, I lifted up my hands and I prayed to Allah 2 units of prayers. In the second unit of prayers, I lifted my hands and I said, Allahumma kun li waliyaka al-hujjat ibn al-Hasan. I finished my prayers. When I looked up, from the side of the door, a light was coming. When that light came, my legs started shaking. When my legs started shaking, I tried to get up. I looked at that light. A person walks in. I said, who are you? You know what he says? He says, Ana Mawlakum Hujjat ibn al-Hasan. Says, I am the 12th Imam, the master of the times. You think that you're alone? I've come to help you. He says, I was shaking at that stage. You know what the 12th Imam says to him? He says to him that I want to meet your friends. You're brave. You're fighting in my way. He says, I took them when I introduced them to people. Then the 12th Imam says, you want to really win this battle? Says, yes. He says, I'll tell you what to do. You do exactly what I do. You attack when I tell you and you hold back when I tell you. They say that within 24 hours they'd recaptured that area and they defeated these people. This is the power of the 12th Imam. Another person says in another story which was going, says that I was lying there shot in the shoulder on the floor. And when I was shot on the floor, they were invading. We had to keep this place. The problem was that there was no one there but me and another guy. We'd been shot, we were on the floor. couldn't see anything, there was blood in my eyes. A voice comes, he says, lift up your weapon. I lifted it up. He says, when I tell you to fire, you fire. When I tell you to stop, you stop. He says that I didn't know what was happening. I was lying there. I was just listening to his command. By the end of it, a person comes, wipes the blood off my eyes. He says, you know what? You've won this area over. How did you do it? He says, I don't know. There was a voice just telling me to fire. This is the 12th Imam alayhi salam. When your enemy has surrounded you and the swords of your enemy is between your shoulders, then cry out for the Mahdi. You'll see that he comes to your help. Those people who are in trouble, those people who have been in trouble, whenever they've called for him, he's come and helped them. What's the difference today then? You think that you can't establish a relationship? Look at that young man, that Nurani young man, who's still alive today, who was praying there, 2 units of prayers, wondering how we're going to get out. But you know what the difference was? He was sincere in his asking. And when he was sincere, that light came. When the light came, the master came. When the master came, Eid came. You think you can't do the same thing? Most of you are probably older than that young man. You know what the difference was? He had the heart. You don't have the heart. We don't have that heart. Establish that heart and you'll see the help of the Imam comes in ghaib. You think the Imam is hidden from you? No, Imam is in front of you. You need to call him. When you call him, he comes. It's the heart. Know then that there are 360 people in this world who are in direct contact with the 12th Imam alayhi salam. You think about 313. At this moment in time, there are 360 people in this world at the moment that the Imam is in contact with. If they could be in your mosque, you wouldn't know. They're the quiet ones who sit at the back, listen to the lecture, and go home. And so a story happens. Who narrates this? Ayatollah Abul Qasim al-Khuwi. You know what he says? He says that I had a friend. We were leaving Azerbaijan at the time. I went to Najaf. My friend went to Tabriz. Says that his friend now says, he says that I went into Tabriz and there was a masjid by the name of Masjid Khan. And in this masjid I went and I started praying, and then after that I went to the madrasa, and the purpose of me going to that madrasa was to learn knowledge. So he says that I walked into the hawza and I started to learn knowledge. And he says that as the system was in those days, it's very cold in Tabriz, it gets to minus 32. It's very cold out there. And he says that when we were studying there, we used to see that there was a man, and his job was used to sweep the floor. And in the winter he would bring our containers for doing ghusl, and he would bring containers for us to go toilet, and he would wipe and sweep and cook the food for us. So we were young, and we used to take the mickey out of him. Say, look at that man. What is he doing? Sweeping the floors. There's too much salt in the food. Not enough tomatoes. He says that one night I went to sleep. That night was a very cold night. And as you know, sometimes at night time when it's cold, even with your central heatings on, when you wake up and nature's calling you, you don't want to get out of bed. So he says that nature was calling me and it was 3 in the morning and I was feeling, I don't want to get out of bed, it's kind of cold. I shifted from one side to the other thinking that I could, maybe forget about the fact that I need to go. But eventually half an hour later I realized, no, it's too desperate. So he gets up in the freezing cold thinking, right, I need to find the toilet. Now he says that opposite the toilet was this man's room and there was only one exit, there were no windows there. He says that as I was walking to the toilet and my eyes were pretty much closed and I was half sleeping, I was literally sleepwalking there, I saw that there was a light coming from his room. And so my eyes opened and I thought, he's awake. And he was talking to someone. And so he says that, well look, I was kind of curious anyway, so I went in the toilet, kept the door open just to see who comes out. So I've got the door slightly open and I'm trying to watch if a person comes out. And I finish and I get up and I go to knock on his door to ask him, who is this person? As I knock on the door, the light goes. And I walked in and it was just him. So I looked at him and I said, well look, you know what? There was a person here. He says, you must have been imagining it. And he says, no, there was definitely a person here. I could hear the voices and the light was on. He says, I might be tired, but I definitely know there was somebody here. So the man says, look, if I tell you, don't tell anyone. He says, go on. He says, I'm one of those 360. That was the hujjat. He had come to see me at night time. This guy falls onto his feet. The next morning he says, I couldn't take it when people would insult this poor man, this muki who was cleaning up, chopping our food, taking our container. Says that when they used to insult him, he says, I couldn't take it because I knew the Imam had a special hand over this man. He said it got to the stage whereby he could tell that I wasn't able to contain it anymore. And when he realized I couldn't contain it, one afternoon after prayers, I saw him come out into the sahn. He was standing there. He bent down to tie his shoelaces, and the next thing I know, he disappeared again, never to be seen again. Why? Because I'd given the game away. These are those helpers of the 12th Imam. At any moment in time they could be here. When one dies, another one comes and takes his place. We all have the potential to be those people. They were ordinary people. He wasn't a faqih. He wasn't an arif. He wasn't a philosopher. He was a normal person. You know what was different about him? He was sincere. It's that sincerity which changes a person. It's to be sincere. We look at the narrations, we see that there were people who were owners of shops. The reason why the 12th Imam would come to them is because they were fair in their dealings. What they sold, they didn't sell it too expensive. Whenever they did something, they would be fair in the way that they dealt with people. In a particular story, there was an alim who sees the 12th Imam sitting outside a coffee shop. So he asks him, the 12th Imam says, shh, don't say anything. He says, why do you come here? He goes, because my servant is fair. He's sincere. He follows the Sharia. He's a good guy. I like good people. We can all be good people. Given the opportunity, Allah tests us. You have a product. You could very easily sell it to someone. So a poor old lady comes in. You could sell it for double the price. What makes you different is that you need to look at yourself and see, Allah is watching me. The Imam is watching me. When you become a fair, decent individual, no, that's the stage when the 12th Imam then comes to you. The 12th Imam will come to you. You need to have the heart for that. But the question is this, are we all ready for the coming of that Imam? Somebody was to ask you, are you ready? Are you truly ready? Look at the ulama and see from within their own lives. Ayatollah Behjat narrates this. Ayatollah Behjat one day was sitting there and he says in one of his speeches, he says that Sayyid Hassan, he mentions the name Sayyid Hassan, most probably was a guy by the name of Sayyid Hassan al-Masqati. Masqati Isfahani. He was one of the students of Sayyid Ali Qadi Tabatabai. He's buried in Hyderabad. Sayyid Ali Qadi had sent him to India to do tabligh, and eventually he died there and he was buried there. Now Ayatollah Qazi had a number of students, right? So one of those students was Allama Tabatabai. One of those students was Ayatollah Behjat. One of those students was Sayyid Hassan al-Masqati. We've already looked at Ayatollah Tabatabai, Qazi Tabatabai, Ali Qazi. Ali Qazi was one of the biggest Urafa who lived in the 20th century. His teacher was Sheikh Sayyid Ahmad Karbalai. His teacher was Khuli Hamadani. His teacher was Muhammad Ali Shushtari. Muhammad Ali Shushtari's teacher was Mullah Jhula. Mullah Jhula's teacher was Imam Mehdi itself. So you see, this is an entire spiritual chain which goes back to the 12th Imam alayhi salam, Imam Mehdi. So in this way you find that, and within this chain you find that it's the cream of the cream. They don't allow anyone to come within this circle unless if they are worthy enough. And it's stated that Sayyid Ali Qadi would only allow mujtahids to come. He would train the mujtahids, he would treat and train the mujtahids. One of those people was Ayatollah Behjat. He was 14 years old when Qadi first found him, and his Qadi started to teach him. They say that Ayatollah Behjat, from the day he was baligh to the day he died, never committed any sins. He was ma'asum in this way, never committed one sin. From the age of 14 all the way down to the age when he died at 97 years old. In his 20s he was asked, how many karamat do you have? So he tells a friend, he says, look, I have between 20 and 30 different ones. At the age later of 80 or 90 they asked him again, have you maintained all of this? He said, yes, I've maintained all of these. That is somebody like Ayatollah Behjat. But anyhow, Qadi is that person that when Ayatollah Khui comes to him, he says, can you give me a spiritual timetable? Qazi says, yes, I'll give you a timetable. Do this for 40 days. 40 days later, Ayatollah Khui comes to him. He says, what have you given me? I can see the barzakh forms of people. I can see them in their states. I'm seeing a big 6-foot dog walking. I'm seeing a pig walking. I'm seeing a sheep walking. He says, I can't take this anymore. You know what Qazi says to him? He says, son, this isn't for you. For you is ijtihad. One day you'll become a very big marja. Leave irfan and go towards ijtihad, go towards faqahat. When you go there, you'll find that's for you. Later on, come 1991, you find that the entire world was doing the taqlid of Abul Qasim al-Khui. But anyhow, he gives him a timetable and he says, why don't you come back? Come back to me after 40 days. Ayatollah Behçet goes to him. He takes Abul Qasim al-Khuy. He says, come and see Ali Qadi. He comes and sits next to Ali Qadi. Ayatollah Behçet sees, and Ali Qadi sees at the time, Ali Qadi is giving him a spiritual exercise. Sayyid Khuy is sitting there. Sayyid Khuy sees right next to him himself. And he sees himself becoming older. And he sees his entire life in front of him. And he sees to the point where from the dome of Najaf, the voice comes, Ayatollah al-Udhma Abul Qasim al-Khuy has passed away. Ayatollah Khuy can't take it. He gets up and he runs. Ghazi says, if he hadn't have run away, I would have shown him his maqam in Jannah as well. But he stopped there, he couldn't take it. That's the status of somebody like Qadi Tabatabai. Qadi Tabatabai, Ayatollah Allama Tabatabai says, I went to Najaf. And when I came into Najaf, I was on the spiritual path. I wanted to know God. Allama Tabatabai, right? One of the biggest philosophers in the 20th century. According to the Western world, one of the biggest philosophers in the 20th century. Henry Corbin says, if you want to see a dead man walking, a man who's annihilated himself, look at Allama Tabatabai. Go today to Stony Brook University and you find the likes of William Chittick say, Tabatabai was the greatest man we've ever seen. Go and see the likes of Hussein Nasr. Hussein Nasr says, everything that I am is because of Tabatabai. Today in the American universities, the status of Allama Tabatabai is higher than the most philosophers of Western origin. This very Allama Tabatabai says, that Allama Tabatabai, if you look at his history, you look at his history and you'll see that he wasn't a top class student, even though today he's the most famous. Harvard University have said from all of the tafasir of the Quran, the commentaries, his commentary Tafsir al-Mizan is the most deepest and the best commentary in terms of philosophy, in terms of hadith, in terms of Arabic grammar, in terms of giving a message, in terms of mysticism. When you look at those 21 volumes, you see that Allama Tabatabai is the greatest when it comes to tafsir. And Allama Tabatabai himself says that I made this easy for the people, that today the people have spent 50 years and they can't understand his tafsir. He says I made it easy for the people. That Allama Tabatabai, in his very beginnings of his studies, he was failing his Arabic grammar. Once he failed it, twice he failed it, 4 times he failed it. He wasn't a clever guy. And so you know what he did? He was pure-hearted though. He goes into the desert. He prays to Allah. He says, look Allah, if you want to make me great, if you want me to do the khidmah of deen, then help me pass this. Make me into something special. And if you don't, then take my life away. You know what Allah did? Expanded his chest. Allama Tabatabai comes back and he becomes the great man Allama Tabatabai. Those are your ulama. Sincerity, that's what's important. Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum, most of you guys have heard of him, the Bahr al-Ulum family. You know why they call the Bahr al-Ulum family? Ocean, Bahr al-Ulum, ocean of knowledge. You know why? Because of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. Again, Sayyid Mahdi wasn't a special spark, wasn't anything intelligent. Later on, when his knowledge became very famous, they went to one of his fellow students who was studying with him back in the day. Says that, you know, Sayyid Mahdi's become such a great guy. He says, well, he was quite thick in his lessons. Let me go to him and ask him what happened. Went to him and he said, how have you could become this Bahr al-Ulum? He says, you know what, when I looked around and I saw people disobeying the Imam alayhi salam, when I saw that people were losing faith in the Imam, I prayed to Allah. I asked the Imam, make me your sign over the people so that when people look at me, they understand you. He says, my chest began to expand. Knowledge started oozing out my chest. This is why today the people know me as Bahrul Ulum. These are our ulama. The status of these people. Even today, the likes of Ayatollah Hassan Zada Amali, who are alive today in Qum, he now says, that when I was pure of heart, he was very pure man, you look at him, he says, I went to the haram of Imam Rada alayhi salam. When I walked into the haram, I prayed and I asked, expand my chest. He says, I see Imam Rada coming from his grave. He kisses me on the lips. When he kisses me on the lips, my chest begins to expand with knowledge. This is why they say that at this moment in time, there is no one in the world who has more knowledge than Ayatollah Hassan Zada Amali. He's alive today and he's in Qum today. These are the scholars. They are the hujjat of Allah upon you, the hujjat of the Imam upon you. This is why in the narration, the 12th Imam alayhi salam says, he says, Innahum hujjati alaykum wa ana hujjat Allah. They are our hujjah on you. Understand the status of the ulama. In a narration it says, if you declare war on the alim, Allah declares war on you. Allah protects the honor of the alim. Don't disrespect those ulama. I've seen in my own life, those people who have disrespected an alim, somewhere down in their life they have been insulted and completely disrespected by the people. Be very careful. The one who is the hujjah protects their izzah. You may not know that. You may think that this person is nothing. but know that Allah protects him, especially the alim al-Rabbani. This is why in a narration it says in a particular narration, the heart of the believer dies if once every 40 days he doesn't go and sit with an alim al-Rabbani. If 40 days goes by and you haven't gone to a scholar, go to a scholar, sit with an alim al-Rabbani. Just go and sit with him. Don't even talk to him, just sit in his company. You know why? It revives the heart. This is why we have these 10 days of Muharram. This is why we have Arba'in. This is why we commemorate every Shahada. This is why we celebrate every Waladat. You know why? So it gives you the opportunity and me the opportunity to sit next to a person who is alim al-Rabbani, so that my heart can be enlightened again. Let me ask you guys a question. You've been coming over 7 and 10 days, however many days it's been. There are scholars around today. There's a scholar maybe outside sitting there. When you see them, when you sit with them, when you talk to them, doesn't your iman become fresh again? Don't you feel like doing something? 15 days ago you didn't feel like doing anything. Muharram comes around, when you look at your scholars you feel like doing something. This is the lutf of the imam. This is your connection to the imam. This is known as alim al-Rabbani. If you want to see if an alim is practicing or not, go in front of him and see. Sit with him. If it revives your heart, you know he's practicing. One of the powers of the imam that he's put there. So anyhow, this Ali Qadi was one of the biggest scholars. Died in 1955. Died in Najaf, buried in Najaf. He was from Tabriz originally. Ayatollah Behjad now says, he says that one of our fellow students by the name of Sayyid Hassan, and we're presuming it's Sayyid Hassan Masqati. So Sayyid Hassan Masqati was in a very bad situation. Who is saying? Ayatollah Behjad. Says that he was in a very bad situation. He was very poor. He didn't have any money. He comes to Qadi. He's asked Qadi, he says, look Qadi, give me an amal. Give me something that I can recite so I can gain the help of the 12th Imam. He says, I was sitting in my room. I didn't know if 40 days had gone or not. As I was sitting there, a voice from the back said, I Sayyid Hassan Masqati, or Sayyid Hassan, son of Sayyid Hussein, for example. He says, do you think that we don't know about your state? Do you think that we don't know about our Shia and what position they're in? Your suffering, do you think we don't know? Do you think we're not going to help you? He says, this was sufficient for me that I forgot my problems. He says, when I looked around, all I saw was light. I couldn't see a person. From that light, a voice was coming. The voice was, do you think that we don't know the situation that you're in? And in this way, the 12th Imam is giving us a lesson. Do you think that the Imam doesn't know how you are? The problems which you're going through, the anxiety which you suffer. At night time maybe you go home and you don't know the solution for your problems. Why don't you go under the sky in the way that it's been prescribed? Take your hat off, go under the sky, bareheaded, and ask Allah, for the sake of the Mahdi, please help me. Do you think relief isn't going to come? For those people who are worried today, you know the best way of removing that? Connect with the Mahdi. Ask him. I don't have anyone. If you don't help me, who's going to help me? You're the Imam of the time. My friends of no avail to me. People I ask, I go to people, but there's no help there. Many a time when you're falling into problems, you know what you do? You try and go to different people. You complain about your problems. You talk about your problems. But you find no solution comes. You only talk to them. You don't find any solution. You go all over the community. You ask people, can you help me? No help comes in essence, in hindsight. Go to a person who can help you. Stand under that sky. Say, Mahdi, why don't you come and help me? We're waiting for you. See how quickly the help of the Mahdi then comes. The Mahdi then says, he says that, look, I'll come faster to help you. You don't need to find me, I'll find you. This is the reality of that man. So in this way, this very same Hassan al-Masqati, in another story we find within our history, we find that one day he comes to Qadi, and he says to Qadi, he says, look, I want an istikhara done. So Sayyid Qadi looks at him and he says, look, you want an istikhara done? He says, yes, I want an istikhara done. He says, look, you've been in Najaf for the last 15-20 years. Can't you do an istikhara yourself? So he looks at him and he says, I want a special istikhara. He says, what type of istikhara? He says, I want a special one, meaning I want one from the 12th Imam. He says, fine, here's an amal, why don't you go and do it? He says, I went to Masjid al-Sahla. I spent 40 days doing that. On the 40th day, when I was doing this amal and as I finished it, a man comes from the back. He taps my shoulder. He says, Sayyid Hassan, get ready, the 12th Imam is coming. He says that I froze then when I heard this. Imagine yourself sitting there. Someone comes and taps you on the back. It says, Fulani, get ready, the 12th Imam is coming. He says, my entire wujood froze. I started to shake. I said to him, look, ask the 12th Imam. Sorry, he doesn't need to come. I'm not ready for him to come. Picture yourself there. You're calling the Imam. Imagine if the Imam was to come. Are you ready for him? He says, look, I can't face the Imam. I'm not ready for him to come. I'm not ready to see his face, his Nurani face. He says he shook. He got up. He went back to Najaf. When he went back to Najaf, Qadi was standing there. Qadi looks at him and he says to him, if you didn't have the ability to take it, why did you ask for it? And that's something for all of us. You're calling the Imam every single day. Allahumma ajjal waliyaka al-faraj. If you don't have the ability to take it, why you're... No, we should ask for it. But prepare yourself. In the same way, in another story, Sayyid Ali Qadi, before he died, he's in the road of Najaf, he's leaving. A person comes up to him. A person said, Hassan Masqati says that I was following Qadi. A person comes to him and says to him, that amal which you gave me to recite, was it from yourself or was it from the Imam? He looks at him in ghadab and he says, in anger, and he says, of course, in jalal, he says, why are you questioning me for? If I take you to the Imam, will you accept it? He says, yes, take me to the Imam. He got angry as well, the guy. I want to ask the Imam myself. He says, fine, hold on to my hand. He grabs his hand. He says, Dayul Ard takes place. Then the streets of Najaf disappear. They come on top of a mountain. Said Hassan Masqat, he says, I also ended up disappearing with them as well. He says, I'm looking from the back. He says that this man falls onto the feet of Qadi. He says, Qadi, take me back. Take me back. I believe now. I'm a believer. Qadi says, why did you ask me then? Why did you ask these things when you're not able to take it? He says, again the mountain disappears. And we're back into the streets of Najaf. These are the issues, my friends. We don't have the potential to take it. We call for the coming of the Imam. Are we really ready within our heart? Are we really able to give everything up? Are we spiritually there yet? It's a long way to go. These are stories which took place in the 20th century. In front of you. Prepare yourself, because times are changing. Today I wanted to look at the government of the Imam. Inshallah we'll look at it tomorrow. But it's important for us to prepare ourselves. Approximately 11 or 12 years ago, in the house of Ayatollah Abdul Karim Kashmiri, ulama were sitting there, Urafa were sitting there. At that stage when they were sitting there, they were discussing and they said, tell our followers, tell those people in the West, make sure that you have houses in the East. Make sure you have destination elsewhere, because we can see the entire economic situation collapsing in the West. We can see in front of us that very soon a time will come where the economic situation will be such that the dollar will be worthless. We can see those times coming. So tell them, prepare yourself. Are you ready? Ask yourselves that. Only you know. Are you ready to take that plunge? Are you ready to follow in the way of Ahlul Bayt? Are you ready to sacrifice in the way of Ahlul Bayt? Ahlul Bayt sacrifice a lot. Today I was thinking of a particular story. Came to my mind just like that. Story of Sayyid Mehdi Bahrul Ulum. Listen to the story. Look at the sacrifice of Ahlul Bayt. A person comes to him, Sayyid Mehdi Bahrul Ulum, and he says to him, Sayyid Mehdi, the haram of Abul Fadl al-Abbas is flooded. Why don't you come and help us remove the body? Why don't you help us to move the grave? Why don't you help us to move the water? Said Mahdi Bahrul Ulum says that I went with this man and we went underground. For those people who have gone underground, those very few people, you'll know that when you go, the actual shrine of Hazrat Abul Fadl al-Abbas is here, but the grave is underneath. He says that when we went there, we started cleaning the remains, the water debris off the grave. At that moment, this person looks at me and he asks me, he says, Sayyid Mehdi, we've heard that Abul Fadl al-Abbas was very tall, but this grave is very small. In the narration it says, Sayyid Mehdi takes off his amam and he hits his head. He says, you've heard right, Abul Fadl al-Abbas was very tall and this grave is very short. But after he died, they broke his hands and they broke his feet and they chopped his head off in such a way that his body decomposed and it became smaller. These are those tragedies. Those people, sacrifice that they've given. Today you are here to cry for the grandson of Zahra. That's sufficient enough for a Masaib. I don't need to say anything. You're here to cry for Ali Akbar, the one who looked like the Prophet in the way he talked and the way he walked and the way he acted. A couple of generations ago, a caravan went from Iraq, went from Tabriz, went to Karbala. They arrived there on a Thursday. That Thursday they went into the haram of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And when they went into the haram on a Thursday night, they did the musibah of Ali Akbar. All of them cried, and they cried a lot. And afterwards they could see that even the walls of the haram of Imam Hussein were crying. It was as if there was a voice coming from the grave of Imam Hussein. So much crying, it was as if the malaika were also crying. They cried, they gave condolences. That night they went to sleep. All 40 or 50 of those people see in the sleep. As they sleep, they see that they're in a plane. And as they're in a plane, a voice comes, says, prepare yourself, Sayyidul Shuhada is coming. Each one of them gets up. They see Sayyidul Shuhada coming. As they see Sayyidul Shuhada coming, they say, Mawla, we could have come to you. Why are you coming to us for? You know what Imam Hussein says? He replies, he says, tell all my Shia that person who comes to ziyarat for me, I Hussein will come to you. You don't need to come to me. He says, I've come to give salam to you. Tell all my Shia that when you come to my ziyarah, I'll come to you. I'll intercede for you. They ask him, they say, Mawla, is there anything for us? He says, yes. Tell that person who's in Tabriz, in that Husseini of yours, in that mosque of yours, there's a person who takes the shoes of the Azadar and he cleans those shoes and he puts them on the rack. You know what these guys do? They come and they cry. But that Mukhi outside, that person outside, he's in charge of the shoes. Tell them my salam is for that person. Oh my follower, the one who, oh my Mukhi, the one who puts the shoes straight. He says, give him my salam. Say Hussein gives his salam to you and tell him that I'll intercede for you on the day of judgment. But say a third thing to the people. Let the people know that if it's a Thursday and it's my haram, don't ever recite the Masayib of Ali Akbar. If it's Thursday and you're in my haram, don't ever recite the Masayib of Ali Akbar. Don't you know that my grandmother comes, my mother Fatima comes, and she can't take it when you recite this. She passes out and she faints. Don't ever recite these musibah. Don't ever recite these Masayib. That's who we're here for, Ali Akbar today. There's a sunnah within the household of Ahlul Bayt, within the family of the Prophet. You know when Imam Hussein used to have a son, you know what he would do? He would take that son, he would name all of them Ali, he would take the son and he would put it in the mihrab of the Prophet in Medina. When Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam was born, he took the small boy, he put him into the mihrab. He says, Allah, I'm giving him in your way. Amir al-Mu'mineen happened to walk past. Ali ibn Abi Talib lifts up this child. He says, Ya Allah, thank you very much for this ni'mah that you have given me. When Ali Akbar was born, he kisses the child, he comes to the mihrab, he puts him in and he says, I've given him in the way of Allah. Sayyidah Zainab walks past, she takes the child, she kisses him and she takes him. From then onwards the tarbiyah of Ali Akbar is in the hands of Sayyidah Zainab. Years go past, Ali Akbar is being trained. One by one he's being trained. As the years go past, he comes to 18 years old, a young man. He's very close to Sayyidah Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab is with him every stage of the way. They say in a particular narration, when Sayyidah Zainab was leaving Medina, she says, is there anyone to help me on? All of the young youth of Bani Hashim come forward. Ali Akbar grabs her by one arm, Abbas grabs her by the other arm to put her on. You know what Sayyidah Zainab says? Sayyidah Zainab says, I don't want any of you to mount me. All I want is Zain al-Abidin to come forward, because after all of you have died, he'll be the one helping me. They say that this Qafila now shifts. It goes towards Karbala. As they come towards Karbala, Ali Akbar's heart is ripping. It's bursting and he wants to know when it's time to fight. Eventually he comes to his father. And one of the most painful moments for Fatima Zahra is that rukhsat, is when he's going. They say that when he was leaving, Imam Hussein alayhi salam comes. He says that, look, if you want to go for death, go and ask 3 people. Ask 3 people if you can go. The first person is the mother. He comes towards his mother. Now bearing in mind, Sayyidah Zainab was the one who raised him. His mother wasn't the one who raised him. It was Sayyidah Zainab, but his mother was very patient as Sayyidah Zainab raised him. They say in a particular narration I've seen that when Ali Akbar goes in, he goes into the tents, he sees his mother, he says to his mother, I want to go and fight. His mother looks down, his mother gets up, goes towards a case, opens the case. She says, Ali Akbar, these are your clothes when you were 6 months old. I've kept them. These are your clothes when you were 6 years old. I've kept them. When you were 14 years old, this is the clothes that you wore on Eid day. She lists everything. She says that, look, my heart doesn't allow me to go. Again he asks, he says, can I go and fight? Again she looks down. Again he asks. Again she looks down. Again now he looks at her and says, on the day of judgment, if Fatima Zahra was to come to you, what would you say? That her son has died and your son is alive? She looks up and she says, look, don't ask me anymore and go now. Comes to a second person, comes to Sayyidah Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab is sitting there. Ali Akbar comes, puts his head on her lap. Sayyidah Zainab now begins to comb his hair. This young man is lying there, long hair. She begins to comb. She says, I know why you're here for. Says, Auntie, please let me go and fight. Let me go and sacrifice myself. Let your son sacrifice himself for the son of Zahra. She says, son, go. He gets up again, he goes to the room of Imam Zain al-Abidin. As he walks in, he begins to kiss the feet of Imam Zain al-Abidin. He begins to kiss the hands of Imam Zain al-Abidin. He begins to kiss the forehead of Imam Zain al-Abidin. Tears begin to come out of his eyes. As the tears touch Zain al-Abidin wakes up and he says, Ali Akbar, why are you crying for? He says, the reason why I'm crying for is because father is alone. Wahidan, Ghariban, Adshana, he's thirsty, he's alone, there's no one here for him. He looks up and he says, where's Abbas? He says, Abbas is gone. He says, where's Qasim? He says, Qasim is gone. He says, everyone is gone. It's only me and you here. He gets up and he says, look, if it was for the sake of father, I would also get up and I would fight. He says, brother, go and fight. Give your life for the sake of father. They say Ali Akbar gets up. Now Ali Akbar comes to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. One of the most moving parts is this. An old father is standing there watching a young son come to him. You know what Imam Hussein says? Imam Hussein says, Ali Akbar, all of your life, either your mother has tied your amama, either your auntie has tied your amama, either your other auntie. I've always wanted to tie the amama on your head. 18 years have gone by. When Eid used to come, your auntie used to tie the amama. I had this desire that I would one day tie this amama on your head. Whenever a happy moment would come, your mother would tie the amama. I've been waiting all my life. Today, can I tie the amama on your head? Says, yes, why don't you tie the amama? They say that Imam Hussein alayhi salam begins to tie the amama, and as he begins to tie it, he begins to say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. They say that he ties the amama like you would tie one for a dead body when you put the final clothes on. He takes the tahtul hanak out, he puts it around his shoulders, and he says, son, why don't you go and fight now? But he says to Allah, he says that I'm sending a son who looks exactly like your prophet in every way. They say that when Abdullah was going with his son, Ali Akbar mounts the horse. Ali Akbar says, father, take my salam. They say that as he was going into the battlefield, as the horse would get faster, he would see that his old father is running behind him faster. When he was slowed down, his father was slowed down. As he would accelerate, his father was accelerate. Ali Akbar stops there. He turns around and he says, father, why are you following me for? Why are you following me for? You know what the reply is? He says, Akbar, if only you had a son like mine, you'd know exactly why I'm following you for. They say that he goes and he fights very well, and he comes back again. As he comes back, he says, father, I'm thirsty. He says, father, I'm thirsty. In the narration it says, Imam opens his mouth. He says, I don't have any water. Why don't you put your tongue inside my mouth and see? They say Ali Akbar takes out his tongue. As he takes out his tongue, one of the Aura 5 said this, the reason why Ali Akbar came back wasn't because he was thirsty. He was the son of Hussein, he knew. But he knew that it was the father. As long as Imam Hussein had his look of imamat over him, no one could touch him. Ali Akbar wanted to die. He was thirsty. He wanted to meet the Prophet of God. The reason for Ali Akbar coming back, according to Urafa, is because he wanted to say to father, father, take your eyes of imamat off me so that I can die in the way of Allah. He says he takes his eyes away. He says, Akbar, I'm letting you go now. Akbar goes into the battlefield. A person comes. He takes a spear. He hits the spear. The spear lodges into the chest of Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar is the only person who doesn't call for his father for help. All he says is, father, take my final salams. At this moment, it's narrated in the narrations that this old man goes blind almost. He holds his eyes. He taps the ground. He says, Akbar, where are you? Your old father has gone blind. He says he comes forward. Ali Akbar is holding his chest. He rips out the thing. He holds his chest like this. His old father is coming. He says, father, tap slowly because my chest is bruised. He says, look, let me look at your chest. He says, don't look at my chest. He says, let me look at your chest so I can rip out whatever's in your chest. He says, I don't want you to, father. He said, know that I'm the son of Ali. He opens his hands up. He sees that there's a spear lodged in his chest. He puts his knee on the floor of Karbala. He puts one hand on the chest. He says, Ya Ali, and he pulls it out. As he pulls it out, there's an earthquake which takes place. The liver of Akbar comes out. Imam Zain al-Abidin says to Sayyidah Zainab, why is Karbala shaking for? She says, look for yourself why he's shaking. He opens the tent curtain. He looks out and he sees an old father carrying his young son on his back. He looks towards Najaf and he says, Ya Ali. Allah la'anatullah ala al-qawm al-zalimin. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.